When the Power Rangers series started, all the Rangers were human, but over the years this has changed. Now, there are many different Power Rangers, and some are even further away from our human normality. Let's not talk about the villains or the mentors, since we know that almost all of them are beings from other worlds. In this video, I only want to mention the Power Rangers that appear in the TV series, since in the comics it is something very different because they can draw anything. We can start by saying that normally humans give orders to dogs, but in Power Rangers SPD there is a dog that gives orders to humans. Commander Kruger, which is a human-shaped dog that comes from planet Sirius. All the inhabitants of this planet are like Kruger, with a skin full of scales like snakes and some differences. Males have longer ears and their skin color can vary between blue, purple or red regardless of gender. Some of these inhabitants may have dreadlocked hair like the commander's wife had. Although Kruger speaks like a human, when angry he can make noises like a dog. The inhabitants of planet Sirius were the founders of SPD. Unfortunately, their planet was destroyed by Emperor Grum. Kruger and his wife are the only known survivors so far in the TV series. Although Kruger is the mentor of SPD, he also becomes a Power Ranger, and that's why I mentioned him in this video. In this same season of SPD we can see that all the Rangers are very different, and we can mention the whole team, including Cat Manx, who comes from a race with feline characteristics like the cats of the earth. The weirdest thing is that we can see that a dog and a cat have fought together as Power Rangers. Still, for me the weirdest one is still the Omega Ranger, since he doesn't even have a real body. The Omega Ranger comes from the future, and due to time travel, his body became a floating sphere of light. When the Omega Ranger morphs, so he has a body, but he must stay with the transformation. Like the entire SPD team, B Squadron, the Omega Ranger named Sam also has powers. These powers come from experiments Cat Manx was doing on the parents of all these Rangers. Continuing with the list, we can mention two brothers who are very different from the other Power Rangers. Andrus and Astronema, who come from planet KO-35, and both were Rangers in Power Rangers in Space. The weird thing about all this is Astronema's story, as she was a villain, but also became a Power Ranger. When she was little, a villain named Darkonda took her somewhere else, and Ecliptor raised her. Because of this, she only learned bad things and became one of the worst villains in the franchise. Astronema was Dark Spectre's lieutenant. Basically she was inside the organization of the worst villains in all of space. Even so, when her brother realized that she was his sister, he did everything he could to get her out of that mess. One of the things Andrus did was to turn her into a Power Ranger, but this only worked for a very short time. Then when Andrus destroyed Zordon, the energy that came out purified Astronema and turned her into a good person. Sometime later she was able to become the Pink Ranger in Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, and with this she fulfilled her dream of being a Power Ranger. It's amazing to see how such a cruel villain could become a Ranger. Imagine Divatox becoming a Ranger after all this time. Astronema was also seen in the legendary battle fighting with many Ranger teams. In this video we can also mention the alien rangers, as they were inhabitants of another planet very different from Earth. The alien rangers came to Earth to save the Power Rangers team as they were in danger. Physically, they have some differences from humans, especially their face and head. Another difference is that they need to be very hydrated in order to live, since they live underwater on their home planet. Something very rare about these rangers is that they did not use morphers to transform, they only did it with their inner power. One of the stories I like the most is that of Cole Evans, the Red Ranger from Power Rangers Wild Force. His parents were in search of a place called Animarium, which is a floating island that later becomes the base of the Wild Force Power Rangers. In this trip, they took their son Cole with them, and they were also accompanied by a friend named Dr. Victor. This trip was in the Amazon, and they found some seeds that were part of the original Master Org. Victor ate these seeds and became the new Master Org. Cole's mother knew they were in danger, so she hid her son, and then Master Org wiped out Cole's parents. Master Org never found Cole, but a tribe of local natives were able to find him. After growing up with the tribe, Cole had many skills that made him an excellent candidate to be a Power Ranger. The tribe returns to Cole what his mother left him before hiding him, a picture of his parents and the red lion crystal. Cole then goes to the city to find his way in life, and there he meets the Power Rangers and becomes the leader of this team. Because he was raised by a tribe far from the city, he had a bit of a hard time adjusting to society, and some thought he was a fool. He also had problems with the former leader of that Wild Force Power Rangers team, as they both wanted to be the leader. Cole appeared in the legendary battle and in the Forever Red episode, being the main ranger of this episode as he was part of the Wild Force season. We know that behind each series there is a very large work team, and among all those people there are designers in charge of making the costumes for each team. We also know that sometimes the decisions are not made by the designer, but by the high-ranking bosses, and that's why sometimes it's not the costume designer's fault that things go wrong. Still, we must make a list mentioning the ugliest costumes that have appeared in the entire history of the franchise. Sometimes the entire team has the same costume, but there are some rangers who have a different costume than the rest of the team. At other times, the costume only looks ugly in certain specific colors, or perhaps because of some modification they made to it. It is worth mentioning that in this video we will only talk about the costumes and everything the ranger has on from the neck down. In this video, we will not talk about the helmets because, as we have mentioned in other videos, the helmet and the suit can be judged separately. I want to start with the Beast Morphers team, a team that almost didn't make this list, but unfortunately, I had to add them. The reason they almost didn't make the list is because I can give them credit for trying something totally different, but we have to be honest, as they failed in the attempt. I know that maybe this decision can be very controversial since there are many who like the costumes of this team, but to me they just seem as if Spider-Man didn't have an official costume and put on the first coat he found along with his mom's belt. In this review, I only want to talk about the three main colors, as the Gold Ranger and Silver Ranger have slightly different and better costumes than the other Rangers. Another very horrible thing about these suits is what they wear on their shoulders. When you look at them from the front, they look like they have a backpack, and that makes them look like they are going to school. I think the worst thing of all is the texture of the fabric, as that is what makes them look like ordinary clothes. The other team with very ugly costumes are in space, and even though it is an iconic series, unfortunately their costumes were terrible. The design of those squares on the chest is something they tried to create to give it a future or space style, but they just look like part of an old video game. I know there are awesome designs that other modern artists have created with these suits, as they have managed to make those squares on the chest something more special, but unfortunately, we have to talk about the original suit. I know that because Power Rangers is linked to Sentai, there are many things about the costumes that should make them a bit generic, but sometimes they overdo it too much. The center of the belt has a design similar to letter mailing envelopes, and the supposed gold color doesn't match anything on the costume. I'm also not going to understand why they have that yellow part near the neck, as that doesn't help the costume design either, and we can tell this by looking at the Yellow Ranger costume. After In Space came Lost Galaxy, and maybe we thought the costumes were going to improve, but apparently, they kept the same people from the previous season. Apparently, these costume designers from the previous season hated Power Rangers and ended up making one of the ugliest costumes in the entire history of the franchise. The white part of the chest ends before it reaches the waist, and this just looks like they ran out of white fabric, and everyone agreed to leave the white fabric up to there. Then, we have this black line that goes from top to bottom, forming some triangles on the white parts. Honestly, whoever did this design was really bored that day and just started drawing some lines with his eyes closed. When the Lost Galaxy season finally ended, we were hoping that now the costumes were going to improve, and then came Lightspeed Rescue. Here the only good thing the costume designer did was to add the gold parts, the rest is a disaster. The design the Rangers have on the chest is the same design the circus tents have. The Red Ranger looks like the holster the popcorn comes in. I can understand that maybe the subject matter is a little difficult to bring to the design and transform it into something real, but to create this you need a group of collaborators, and it's hard to think that all these people agreed to send this mess. Lightspeed Rescue is over, and now there's no way they didn't fire the previous designer, and next season we're going to have some amazing costumes. Apparently, they hired the same team with bad taste and created these costumes for Time Force. These are super simple costumes, but simple doesn't always have to be bad. Unfortunately, on this one occasion, simple worked against them, as the costumes looked terrible. The chest design is one of the worst designs I've seen, as it's just arrows pointing down. On top of that, they add some silver-colored parts on the boots and forearms. This suit is definitely unsalvageable, and although the idea of making the helmet visor the same color as the suit was very innovative, unfortunately, the suit ruined everything. After that season ended, we had several seasons with excellent costumes, because apparently, they fired the team that was in charge of designing the costumes, but when we got to the Operation Overdrive season, they hired them again. This time the designers wanted to ruin everything and mark all their hatred towards the franchise. Being quite honest, the costumes are not super ugly, but the logo for this season is the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. For those who don't know, I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I've seen a lot of horrible logos in my professional life, but this season's logo was one of the worst I've ever seen. The design that the suits have was based only on dividing the color with a white part in the center of the body and under the arms. The rest is only the logo and the parts that complement the boots, gloves and shoulders, which are made of a silver color. The decision to put these parts in silver was a good one, but the lines made them look like old metal parts you find in a dumpster. For me, the worst thing about this season is not the regular Team Rangers. For me, the worst thing is the 6th Ranger, who has a few different things on his costume and raised the bar for how terrible a costume designer can be. Let's start with the color of the Ranger, which is supposed to be silver, and his suit looks like what people wear to work out and want to sweat a lot. He also looks like a chicken wrapped in aluminum foil about to go in the oven. In addition to this, they changed the white color that all the Rangers have and put it in black color, but with an orange line. To continue with the terrible decisions, they changed the design of the shoulders and make all that bigger and uglier. Finally, all those silver parts on the other Rangers can't be the same color as the Silver Ranger because they won't show, so they changed them to blue. So, this Ranger ends up with a color scheme of silver, blue, orange, black, white and red. The award for the ugliest costume in Power Rangers history goes to the Silver Ranger from Operation Overdrive. In this channel we have always stood out for always mentioning the positive in everything that happens in the Power Rangers franchise, but like everything in life, where there are good things, there are also bad things. It is impossible that in 30 years of history everything could be perfect, and although we can recognize the great effort made by the producers of the series, we must always admit when things are not good. This does not mean that everything we mention in this video is conclusive, since we all have different tastes, and I always say it in the videos. In this video we are going to mention which were the worst seasons of Power Rangers, but this does not mean that they are a total failure, they are just not the best. Leave in the comments which have been for you the worst seasons that you have seen of the Power Rangers. Let's start with Ninja Steel, one of the worst seasons in history with a terrible script despite having good actors. It should be noted that the theme of the ninjas had already been used and it was a very worn out idea, so it was lousy that they made the decision to adapt this theme. The problems that the Rangers have in each episode are the center of each story, and the solution to that problem is the one that must be incredible to make a spectacular episode. The problem this season had is that the solutions to these problems were very silly, and even though Power Rangers is not meant for adults, it was still a terrible script. On top of all this season had Victor and Monty, two of the worst characters in the entire franchise, although personally, for me, I still think J-Borg is worse. Leave in the comments if you want a list of the worst Power Rangers characters and tell me which one is the worst for you. The next season is Turbo, and even though this series has some good things, the bad things are too many and almost killed the franchise. Even Saban has said that Power Rangers in Space are the ones that saved the franchise, and In Space was released after the failure of Turbo. You obviously can't save something that isn't in danger, so, if the In Space series were the saviors of the franchise, it's because the previous series almost destroyed the franchise. We can start with the theme of the series, and that is that many do not understand that the theme of the season is one of the most important things in the series. It may not be the most important thing, but it's the beginning of everything, and if you start with the wrong step, then it's going to be harder to straighten the path later. Turbo had the theme of the cars, and the problem is that when fans watch a show, they don't want to see something that is already in the world, they want to see something out of this world, something that is not commonly seen. Maybe they were different cars with powers and that could be transformed, but they were still cars, and that's something you see every day in the streets. Another thing we can point out is that there were already Rangers that were in several seasons, and this causes you to get bored of the characters that you have seen for so many years. It doesn't matter if those characters were good, the important thing is that fans got tired of seeing them again. Let's talk now about Mystic Force, one of the worst issues in the history of Power Rangers, and Disney came to destroy the franchise with its magic. I want to highlight two things that I liked about this season. To me, the costumes seem to be the best, and the Rangers Solaris Knight, White Mystic, and Wolf Warrior are also characters that I liked. Unfortunately, these characters were thrown away as their costumes don't match the season, their powers don't match the season either, and having 3 special Rangers in one season is a waste. Everything else about this series was terrible, including the character development and the script. When a character gets to become a Ranger, they are always grateful and surprised, as being a Ranger has always been a mystery and an honor for anyone. However, we have a Pink Ranger who complained because she didn't like that pink was her color. We also have a Red Ranger who didn't believe in magic, rather silly since the theme of the season is magic. The next season is Megaforce, and here we can include Super Megaforce since they are the same characters and basically the same story. It's unfortunate that one of the best costumes in the whole franchise is wasted in one of the worst stories. I know there are many fans who don't like these costumes, but in my opinion, I do like them as they are different and have good color combinations and designs. The important thing is that this season could not develop their characters well, and many fans have been complaining that this story seems a copy of Mighty Morphin in certain things, like for example the Blue Ranger. Another thing they did wrong in this season is that they used many scenes from the Japanese series, and what the production said is that they did it this way to reduce costs. We all know that the beginning of the failure of any series or movie is when they want to reduce costs, because that causes the poor quality of the final product. Finally, we must say that they were talking about the legendary battle in many episodes, and in the end, it only lasted several minutes. This was a serious mistake. The only thing we can save from this season is the Yellow Ranger. All of these series are terrible, but the worst of all time is still Operation Overdrive. You can search all over the internet on all the lists of worst seasons, and Operation Overdrive is always going to show up on every list. Maybe the other seasons aren't on some list, but this season is always going to be there. This is no coincidence, and this season started out being terrible from its name, its logo, its costumes, and all the visuals. The saddest thing of all is that this is the second season on this list where they are celebrating an anniversary, as this season celebrated their 15th anniversary. This season has the worst thing that any entertainment production can have, and that is that it doesn't have exactly that, entertainment. Operation Overdrive is listed as the most boring season of all according to many fans, and it is the most mentioned in all the lists. I want to know what your opinion is, so write in the comments your list of the worst Power Rangers seasons and the worst characters. If you think any of these seasons deserves to be on this list, like this video, and subscribe for more Power Rangers lists.